few minutes before 6 o'clock. So we're going to let some folks in before we actually start the program. But mahalo for joining us. Aloha mai kako. It's 6 o'clock. We're grateful that you're here. We're going to wait a few more minutes as some other folks trickle in. We'll start in about 2 minutes. We have a fabulous presentation for you this evening, and we see you. We know you're here, and we'll open up the show in just a few minutes. Aloha mai kako. Welcome this Friday evening. We are so glad to be presenting another episode of Hey NOI'INA Ma'i, presented by Leikuluwaimaka Meleiseā and Kahikinaokalā Domingo. Tonight's program is called Ola Na'iwi, and is taken right from Anatomia. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself, Kim Ku'ule Bernie with Papa'ololokahi. Additional sponsors are Mauli Olama Lama Lama, our health workforce development hale at Papa'ololokahi, and specifically the Ola Na'iwi continuing education series. Sorry about that. So we've got Lisa here with us, Lisa Ka'anoi with the scholarship program at Ola Na'iwi, and a couple of housekeeping announcements. This webinar is being recorded and it's being live streamed across several platforms. An evaluation will be sent at the close of the webinar, and a reminder will be sent again tomorrow to those who attend on the Zoom. This program is also in acknowledgement of February as Mahina Olelo Hawaii, and although some of the copy will be both in English and Hawaiian, it really harkens to the ike kupuna that comes from our Hawaiian language. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce to you Maka and Kala. They are archive assistants at Papaololokahi. They are helping to build an online repository of documents and reports and files that we've been collecting from various sources, various collections. And we've taken a little bit of a delay due to the pandemic and the inability to be in the office the whole time, but they will get it up and running again soon. And we hope that within the next year or so, we will have a robust online repository, a Native Hawaiian health archive. But today, they've got a really exceptional program that comes right from the book Anatomia by Dr. Jarrett Judd. So I'll turn it over to you, Maka and Kala. Aloha nui kako.
Mai ka puka ana kala I hae kumukahi I Hawaii a hiki loa aku I ka velona o kala ka mole olu o le hua. E nā oiwi, e nā kupa, e nā kamaaina, e nā mamo aloha, o nei kulaiwi e waiho ala. Mai ke piko o ke po'o ai ka pole o ka wāwai, o nā kupuna no hoi e malama no hoi a kako a pau. I nei, maula e ne ini. E ola no nā iwi o nā kupuna e waiho ala. Ka mea e aina I ka aina e kulaiwi ai ke kulaiwi. O mākou no hoi nā iwi kua mo o hoi o lako nā kupuna. O mākou no hoi, nā kanaka e lawe lawe mau ana I ko lako mau ike, na awau a me ke aloha a hiki loa aku ke ala. Oi puna lau ke aloha ia oko pakahia pau. Awau no hoi ki ia o Kahikinaokalā.
Aloha o kia o Leikuluwaimaka, Meleiseā.
A e no hoi maua, ke waiho aku nei ke ia wahi mau ike I mo o ko ke anaina e anaina mai nei ka lehu na makamaka. No ke ia mahina kula ia o hoi o kako ke ia mahina oli oli, ke ia mahina e ho'olaule ai. Ka olelo aloha o ke ia aina nei, ka olelo Hawaii. Hau oli mahina olelo Hawaii ia o ko pakahi a pau.
Aloha kako, mahalo nui for joining us tonight. As Kala had mentioned, this is in honor of Mahina Olelo Hawaii. And we just like to first off thank and mahalo Kapololokahi and Auntie Kim for introducing us, and also all of our hoa and limahana behind the scenes who are handling and contributing to the backstage tech support. Mahalo everyone.
So our presentation today is called Ola Naivi. And why did we choose that name? Because today we're going to be focusing on some stuff that were very important to our kupuna, this thing that we call iwi. And if you look it up in the Marika Benapukui Hawaiian dictionary, it's defined first of all as the bones, as a bone, a carcass, but more specifically, as Pukui says in her definition, the bones of the dead, which are considered one of the most cherished possessions of Hawaiians. They were hidden, and hence there are many figurative expressions with iwi, meaning life and old age, as you see below. So it was a very foundational principle that our kupuna believed in, that iwi were something that were very important. And as you may or may not have caught in my velina, something that makes our homeland is the kula iwi, or the plane of which our ancestors' remains are. And that's what connects us to this aina. That's what connected our kupuna to their aina. And that's what connects us to our kupuna, their iwi, their bones. So you can see that foundational in both the human sense and also in the environmental sense. Very important to us. And let these bones live, ola naivi, not only the bones themselves, but the bones as representatives of our ancestors and the knowledge that they left to us.
So our inspiration for today's presentation came from Anatomia, written by Jarrett Parmalee Judd, who was an American physician, originally came for missionary purposes, But he wrote this book in 1838, and it's solely the only book of anatomical text that exists in Hawaii. And he actually, while we were researching for this presentation, we found out that he modeled it after this book. That's an image of it on the right-hand side, the class book of anatomy. And that was actually written by this man named Jerome Smith, written 4 years prior, or published 4 years prior in 1834. So this book at the time was really the staple of anatomy books that students were studying. And Dr. Judd was at the time a teacher at Lahainaluna Seminary, what we know as Lahainaluna High School. Many of our well-known, famous Hawaiian scholars were educated there. Scholars like Sami Manaikalani, scholars like David Malo, and we see these really monumental works of Hawaiian history coming out of scholars from Lahainaluna Seminary. So the main purpose of Anatomia was to educate these students that were learning there. And what I found really interesting about Dr. Judd's choice of writing this book was that instead of kind of just not copying, but transliterating words from Mr. Smith's class book of anatomy, Dr. Judd specifically chose to Hawaiianize the terms that he would be writing about in Anatomia. So when you look at the book and how it's formatted, the terms that are listed, not just bones, but muscles, functions of all of these terms, functions of all of these body parts, they're really modeled after Smith's, but done in a Hawaiian way of thinking. And when we think about Judd's circle, I guess, and Judd's influences around him at the time at Lahainaluna, we can not assume, but kind of guess that he's getting a lot of influences from other Hawaii, from other Kanaka Hawaii, from other scholars who are well versed in a Hawaiian way of thinking. So what we have here is one of the diagrams that Judd lists at the end of his book, but we just went and matched the terms up that he provided along with this diagram, because in the diagram it's not listed or anything put together. So we have all of these terms, things like iwi hua, iwi lai, iwi papalina, iwi maha, iwi kiopoi, just a few to name. You want to say anything about this slide? We'll go to the next slide. So like I was saying, the left side picture is a diagram taken from Smith's class of anatomy book. So you see that Judd uses the exact same diagrams, but the way that he chooses to explain all of the EV, all of the EO are maka'olelo Hawaii in Hawaiian ways of thinking. So just to kind of compare and contrast how Judd's is and how Smith's was.
So, well, before we move on about how Leikuluwaimaka was saying, the way that Hawaiians transliterated and translated new terms that they were unfamiliar with, Pukui has a little excerpt about that in her dictionary. She says that there was two kind of ways that Hawaiians translated words from other languages into Hawaiian. One would be, she said, like a transliteration. So, for example, if we use the word computer, that a transliteration of the word would be kamipula, which is into Hawaiian to copy the sounds. But Pukui also has another example of the same word, computer, but the thought or the meaning of the word is rather expressed in Hawaiian. So she uses the word lolo wila, lolo being brain and wila being electric. So you see it's like an electric computational brain. So you see the two types, and you'll see that that kind of thinking in all of these different terms inside of Anatomia. Some are translated directly, and some the meaning or the meaning behind the English word is represented in Hawaiian.
But that's also not to say that no other term is better or worse than the other ones. I mean, today we still use, like Kala was explaining, the term lolowila. We both use kamipula and we use lolowila. So both are definitely beneficial to language. It's just both just have each pros and cons of each use of the context.
And there was really no way to know if as Leikuluwaimaka said, Judd was at Lahaina Luna and he had all of these different confidants and probably informants. So there's really no way to tell whether or not this is an old term or not. So it's interesting to see the way that the words come out in the book.
Another interesting thing, I think that's important to know is looking at the way that Judd kind of Hawaiianizes these terms is kind of simple to us because I mean today as second language learners, a big thing to us when we're starting to talk about how do we describe newer terms or how do we describe newer technologies, like what would be the Hawaiian word for that? We need to haku a word because of course that didn't exist before. And sometimes we tend to overcomplicate things, but looking at Judd's way of thinking, and maybe not even just Judd, but the way of thinking 200 years ago was much simpler than we make it out to be. So it's a good reminder to us as second language speakers that sometimes it's not as hard as we think it is, and to just focus
We'll
back.
go ahead and look at some examples of this in the next slide.
So like we said, although Judd had terms that he did Hawaii or Hawaiianize for lack of a better term, there were terms that were just taken from either their Latin meaning or their English meaning that was given in Smith's book. So only a few. So these would be like the unsa form, which literally means hooked bone or hooked. So he translates that to iwi low. A low, a good example of low is you use low to like pick ulu, or
it was a long stick with some kind of hook or something to hook down the fruit that was high up in the tree. So
right. The magnum, of course, like magnum is large, translated to iwi nui. Wisdom teeth, niho o'o. O'o is a term for aging or maturity or just growing older. The lunar, translated to iwi mahina, of course, moon and lunar. Navicular but navicular today, which its Latin context is just a boat shaped, and the navicular is a boat shaped bone. So that Judd uses iwi va'apa, va'apa like a rowboat. The incus or the anvil bone located in the ear, translated into iwi kua. For those who are familiar with beating kapa, the kua is a tool that's used to pound the kapa and make it more lahi-lahi. The malleus, translated to iwi hamare or hamale or hammer, because that's what it looks like, but malleus is also formed or also means hammer, or mallet means mallet in Latin. So we see here, this is just an example of how Anatomia is laid out. We picked these two examples because these are examples that seem so simple, words to describe each, or words that are each finger and each tooth, but were words that neither of us knew prior to reading this book, just because it's not language that comes up every single day, and it's not something that we had to use, so it wasn't something that we thought to go look up. But what's interesting is that in the dictionary, Pupui doesn't list some of these terms. So that's another valuable aspect of reading works and texts like Anatomia, because although these texts were written over 200 years ago, we're not really seeing them in other works. Just like, I don't know if you folks were able to join us for our last webinar, but when we compared Andrews and Pupui dictionary, just how Andrews and Pupui have different words, Anatomia has lots of words as well that aren't seen in other collaborated works or compiled works. So Nokape'ahi lima, or concerning the hand, we have of course we all know mana mana nui. That was the only finger term we knew before, but we have lima kuhi, lima lo'ihi, lima komo. I'm assuming lima komo because that's your ring finger, so you komo ka, I don't know, what is the word for ring now? Yeah, komo your ring on top. Apo mana mana lima, komo apo mana mana lima on top of your lima komo. And then your pinky and lima iki.
A small finger.
Yes. And then Naniho Hekanakolu Kumalua, 32 teeth. Concerning the 32 teeth we have 8 teeth to 8 milk-eating teeth. 4 he calls this ole, 8 kui and 8 kui nui. So Yeah, and then 4 ni ho'o, which is our wisdom teeth. So we explained oho. Yes.
So we'll just go off ahead and start with some of the examples that are found in Anatomia. And one of the first examples that Judge has when he lists all the bones is this bone here called the iwi hoi. And you see in this diagram here, the iwi hoi is the scapula, excuse me. And in the left side, it's kind of highlighted in red. And in the middle, the reason I put this one in afterwards, we originally only had the one on the left, but if you looked at the right arm of the body, it's actually, the arm is extended upward. And then on the right side here, you see a picture of a Hawaiian canoe paddle. And in the old days, traditional Hawaiian canoe paddles, they didn't have that little T, can't really see the T part. There's only the ku'au or the handle. It was just straight up to hold. There was no handle on top. So if you see the diagram here, the right arm, it sort of looks like a hoi. So the femur, not the femur, right? Humerus plus the scapula looks just like the hoi extended. So that's why it's called an iwi hoi, because it mimics that shape, or the bone mimics the shape of the hoi.
There are also references to this scapula as iwi hoi hoi. If you folks are doing research, yeah, iwi hoi hoi, same thing, scapula bone.
Something to I think of when I see this, that motion. If any of you are familiar with making imu, after the pig is cooked and it comes out and you have to shred all the meat, one of the best tools is the scapula of the pig, right? They say that the anatomy of the pig and the human is similar. And that motion, it's perfect for shredding the meat. It's like the same motion you use when you paddle canoe and you shred them like this with the scapula. Perfect. So to me, today it makes sense too.
Here we have iwi or your clavicle, collarbone. This is one of my favorite ho'o Hawaii, or words that are ho'o Hawaii, just because of the mana'o of this iwi being a lei around you. We see also place names related to some of these terms, like iwi lei in Honolulu. And if you look at where geographically iwi lei is placed or located, iwi lei is before we had all the harbors and all the new Honolulu harbor, all those things built in, all the piers built in, man-made land, man-made harbors, all those things. Iwi lei really was like a lei around the harbor, a lei of land around the harbor, where how it's located. So I also think about these connections, and it just goes to show the vai of Olelo Hawaii, looking at all these different aspects, all these different things that come together when we just see simple words.
Another thing too, I didn't explain it, but in my second slide with all the definitions from Pukui, one of the definitions she gives for iwi is actually the name for the boundary of the aina. Either a low-lying rock wall or sometimes just a singular stone would be called the iwi, or the boundary. So it makes sense that iwi lei, that iwi that they're speaking of, is the shape of actually the boundary of the aina too. So more than one application. And here's another example, the iwi huamoa. I think you can kind of guess in the middle, the femur bone, that little joint or the head between the puhaka or the hip bone and the femur bone is that little rotary head called the iwi huamoa. And as you can see right on the right, looks just like a huamoa or an egg. So simple kind of connections.
Things that we didn't, when we were looking at it in the book, we said, oh, iwi huamoa, what could this be? And then when you look back into, because it doesn't have the diagrams in the book, or it doesn't specifically say this is what huamoa looks like. So when we go look up, oh, femoral head, what does a femoral head look like? Oh, huamoa, that's why, or ikikumu, right? Here we have iwi uluna, or the humerus, or this long part of your arm right here. What was interesting in that, when we were reading the introduction, the preface, the foreword in Anatomia, some of it was written by Dr. Ben Young, and he had an interesting take on iwi uluna too. And he was writing about, for example, iwi uluna that Judd describes is probably because your iwi uluna is bones that recline when you rest your head, or when you rest your head on a pillow or you recline back to go to sleep. And so uluna is pillow, but when we looked up uluna in the dictionary, we also found out that uluna actually means to support the head or to prop up the head. And so when you look at where the humerus is or where the iwi uluna is, it's a place for your po'o to rest on or to reside upon, and something that props you up. Also in the dictionary, looking up uluna or iwi uluna, pupu'i offers the term hopua as well. So the hopua is another word for iwi uluna, not found in Judd, but hopua was found in Pupu'i's dictionary, and hopua is the crest of the wave.
And also hokua too is the word for the nape of the neck. So if you right back here between your back and that kind of pu'u there and up to your head, that's also called the hokua. And what does the hokua support? The hokua supports the awamo, the carrying stick. It rests right on top of your hokua. It's kind of like a pillow for the awamo too. So I think that would be another reason why the iwi uluna, even though in this diagram it only shows the humerus bone, but in the Hawaiian sense, it actually extends past the shoulder and also to the neck area as well. So that whole thing could be a uluna. And also right where your head rests on the uluna too, as you see in the diagram. This next example is the iwi ke'ehi. Ke'ehi is to step or to tread on something. And in the dictionary, Pukui has different definitions, and one of them is a stirrup of a horse in the saddle. So if any of you have ever seen like the pa'u riders or working on the ranch, when the cowboy or the paniolo is sitting on top of the horse, there's a saddle like this. And these little hanging things where the foot goes, that's called the stirrup, right on the side. And if you look at the diagram of this bone here, it kind of looks just like it, with the wide part on the bottom and then up to the top. So it kind of looks just like the stirrup, the ke'ehi.
So the stapes bone is the smallest bone in your ear, and I believe the second smallest bone in the body entirely. Another meaning that we found for ke'ehi in a dictionary was the small gaps between places between, I guess, grass and a thatched roof. And you have halepili, probably that small space that you see the sun coming through. That was also that little gap or that little space was ke'ehi. And so we thought, oh, these are probably both meanings that Dr. Judd is thinking about when naming this stapes bone iwi ke'ehi, because of course the stirrups look just like iwi ke'ehi or stapes bone, but also comparing the size, the small size of how small the stapes bone is to that small gap that you see in the halepili is really the beauty of a lot of Hawaii, and seeing that mana'o behind naming things.
And another thing too, that because Hawaiian has such a small alphabet, one word can mean many things. So without even looking at the anatomic use of the word ke'ehi, you can see how over time new technology has arrived to Hawaii, aka the horse and the stirrup and the saddle. And probably before that, the word for ke'ehi was, of course, the traditional use that they had in old Hawaii. As Leikuluwaimaka explained, that little gap in the house. But when they probably saw the first horse and the first stirrups, they say, hey, that reminds me of the ke'ehi on top of our hale. So that's probably how that stirrup was made. And then again, when Judd was looking at the anatomy of the human body, he said, hey, that kind of looks like the stirrup of the horse and or the ke'ehi above the hale. So there's even more the way
There's
that the etymology of the word. Our next example here is the olona, which is the ligaments and the tendons, not only in the foot, but throughout the body. And olona is this plant here you see in the middle, not very common to us here in modern Hawaii, but in olden days was used as cordage, one of the strongest cordages in the world, actually. And if you read Catherine Summers' Hawaiian Cordage, she has a long explanation for the olona, its growing, how it grew in a kind of a swampy area. So today we don't really have that much olona, but on the right side, courtesy of Bishop Museum, is a roll of olona cordage. And if you look at the diagram of the ligaments and the tendons, it has that kind of fibery sort of fibery look to mimic the cordage, and the ligaments and the tendons is really what holds everything together, and it kind of has that elasticity, just like the Olona cordage can. So another way that you can kind of see the connections between an anatomic use of the word and what it actually represents more commonly in the world.
Here we have the iwi kuapo'i, or the patella, commonly referred to as the kneecap. And so if you're not familiar, the iwi kuapo'i is actually the weatherboards of a canoe, or another word used is splash guards. Yeah, splash guards for a canoe. We just have a vehe on the side, the knee pan, waipona ka iwi ihu, maluno ka ihu, like me ka kuapo'i maluno ka wa'a. So the vehe used in the dictionary explains that kuapo'i is like your iwi kuapo'i, or like your kneecap, and then just like elikimeke kuapo'i, just like the kuapo'i found on top wa'a, or found on top canoe.
So actually, if anyone out in the audience is familiar with canoe anatomy, there's actually a similar word, kaupo'i, that's actually right next to the kuapo'i. So you see in the next slide, the diagram. So this is a wa'a kaurua, or double hull canoe, but also in our regular single hull wa'a with a iako and an ama on the side. It doesn't look similar. It doesn't actually have this this upright board, but if you see, like in canoe competitions, in the front of the wa'a has that little where the first seat sits. There's that little thing right behind the manu. So the kuapo'i is that wall right by the seat, and the kaupo'i is a little more forward. So the kuapo'i is just like as Leikuluwaimaka sees here was mentioning earlier.
Yeah, so mahalo to PBS for this diagram, but so they call this paliwai, palikai, the splash guard, but in the vocabulary list used before this diagram also had kuapo'i defined as the splash guard or weatherboard. So it doesn't say kuapo'i on this diagram, but that's the kuapo'i. And just thinking about the use of not the use, but the function of your kneecap, or the iwi kuapo'i, or the patella, and then the function of this kuapo'i makawa'a, maluno kawa'a, we see that they're so similar in function, but differ in, I guess, places where they contribute to.
And as we go through all these words, it's so interesting because it's not like all the anatomic uses and the words and the original etymology of the words all come from one kind of place. It's not all of the words for bones come from all the wa'a words. You can see that the way that Hawaiians thought, especially when they're in meaning, means that they took whatever was familiar to them and kind of made that connection in all different places. So it's interesting to see that our kupuna were very smart. They were very cunning and crafty with the way that they named these new terms and these new things that they're finding.
And it also shows the level of intimacy that you have with the language when you have Olelo Hawaii thriving around you, and you have all these first language speakers around you. Because if we were to look at a patella, if we were to look at a kneecap, and our kumara were to go, okay, we need a term for this word, what would we use? I don't think we would pick iwi kuapo'i. It would be hard for us to make that connection. One, because neither of us are wa'a people. We're not people that sail and work on wa'a and all those kinds of things. So it's just goes to show the levels of knowledge that is needed to be able to name things and to be able to make sense of things like that and to put them together.
And the level of culture that has to be living required to have all this different knowledge, because we don't sail on canoes anymore. Well, some people, many of us still on things like hokulea, but we don't travel from island to island on a canoe anymore. We're not using olona to thatch up our houses anymore. We don't live in halepili, so we wouldn't know what a ke'ehi is. And all these different kinds of terms that our kupuna were very familiar with because it was simply their life and it was simply the way that they lived. So they knew all these different things and they pulled from those things in order to apply their knowledge to the things that were coming to their shores and the new ideas and the new concepts that they had to process themselves. So really close relationship of culture and language, almost I would say symbiotic, but maybe one and the same. Reciprocal. Yeah. So here's another example that this is one of my favorite words or terms, not just because it's related to our topic, but it's very poetic, as our kupuna were in almost every aspects of their lives. But the ibihilo is the word for the femur bone. And the thigh bone, the femur bone, and also the last rib bone, poetically the very core of one's being. So there's a saying, koni koni anaika ibihilo. It's found in many Hawaiian mele, different olelo no eo and also mo'olelo, to mean the very core of one's being, that comes from that very profound place. Hawaiians have the seat of thought and the au, but also the ibihilo was something that represented the very genuine and deep and profound things as well that went beyond even sometimes the na'au as well. But another name for the ibihilo is the auhau. And that word auhau is used mostly today as a poke or a section of a bigger word called the ku'auhau or genealogy. So the ku'auhau was a historian, a genealogist, and the auhau is the name for the femur bone. And I wrote a little piece about this maybe 2 years ago, published by Paporo Kahi for Mahina Ola Hawaii in 2020. And I talked about my analysis of this word and why is it also known as the auhau? Why is the ibihilo the very core of your being? Well, the auhau is the femur is the biggest, is actually the largest bone in your body. And to me, that because we see that iwi or the bones were so very cherished and important and profound to Hawaiians that it was very well kept. And the reason why the auhau, the biggest bone in your body, is almost literally the representation of your kupuna in you. And that's why it was very important to use as a term for genealogy, because one's genealogy was the way that you're represented. It's who you are. So that auhau being seen in both places, in the form of your genealogy and also in your body, the largest bone with the most mana. Yeah.
And so when you look at, the use of mo'opa, how it's a succession, mo'o meaning succession of auhau, when like how Kahikinaokalā was talking about going to be with you, when I think about mo'opa, after knowing these more higher level meanings of all these words, I think about your femur being the biggest bone of your body, and you're being named your auhau, and being that every single place you step, every single place you walk, everywhere you go, your kupuna are literally with you, like in your auhau. It's mo'oku auhau. So understanding all these vehevehena, all of these different contexts to these words, to not just anatomy, but different cultural references to these mele places, really brings you closer to your language and your kupuna. It turns into something much more valuable. It's not just an anatomy term anymore for us. It turns into our culture being lived through.
The way we view the world.
Yeah, the way we view the world simply changes by understanding meanings like this and contexts like this.
So with that, wanted to kind of wrap up our talk today about iwi and all of our different mo'olelo that we brought up. With a mahalo, and mahalo to folks for always coming to our presentations in NOI'INA, and we enjoy doing them. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
we
do
really
have a
I'm
true
so thankful for
audience.
Mahina Olelo Hawaii, being students of Olelo Hawaii, being master students at the University of Olelo Hawaii. And seeing all the different contexts using Aloha Hawaii today, we're so thankful that there are so many communities, there's so many kipuka that Aloha Hawaii thrive today. And we're really lucky being youth that are able to be around this time, being able to be around these communities and people and seeing how language thrives in different environments, in different contexts. We're just really thankful to be able to play a small part in revitalizing or using Aloha Hawaii and being
Normalizing.
just two more people, just two young kids trying to normalize Aloha Hawaii by doing our part and researching things like this. And we always want to stress the importance, as being archivists, librarians, stressing the importance of using texts from the past. I think sometimes we tend to forget about them because we're just so busy catching up, being in the now, kind of making our own resources, which is just as important, but realizing that so much of the vai lives in the past. And it's kind of like Navai e ole, right? It's kind of poho if we don't go back and use these things. So going back to look through Anatomia this past month and preparing for this presentation was really humbling and special to us to be able to learn this and to be able to look at anatomy through a Hawaiian perspective and a Hawaiian view. And it kind of changes our ways of looking at things, not just anatomy-wise or anatomical-wise, but in everyday things.
Thank you both so much. You are really contributing to the body of knowledge that we get from our kupuna. And I want to open up the floor. If there are folks that have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or the comment section if you're in Facebook, or go ahead and add them to, put them in the Q&A section, because these two really do have the answers. And in fact, in the evaluation that will pop up in your browser as soon as you leave this webinar, that one of the questions, it's a really brief evaluation, a real simple one, 5 questions. And one of the questions is, what other topics would you be interested in hearing about that would come from Hawaiian language resources? So give Maka and Kala some inspiration into other topics, other subjects. So Wainani says, hoi hoi, old timers claimed that they could predict to know the weather based on how the knees felt. Yeah, so that kind of fits right in. Mahalo nui. Delight Satter is here from Atlanta. She's a longtime research colleague of when we had Amy Hale and some of our stronger research days. Aloha, Delight. Yeah, so if anybody else has questions here for Kahikinaokalā or Leikuluwaimaka, we welcome them. We'll take them right now, either on Facebook or on Zoom. Mahalo to all the mommies and sisters and family members that are calling in. We see you too. Question. Oh, let's take this separately to the two of you. What is your favorite part about the work that you do?
That's a good question. A favorite part of the work I do. I think I just like sitting and being with all this old stuff that it makes me realize that us in Hawaii, we're really lucky to have all these materials that are left for us. Just in our Hawaiian newspapers alone, we have like 1 million pages of Hawaiian language source, and that's not including the piles and little how many thousands of square feet of archival stuff that we have in Hawaii. So it's something that excites me to know that even though we've been making such big strides in Hawaiian knowledge today, that there's still so much to research. And to me, that's exciting, that there's so much more to always learn. And there's so much more that we can continue to learn about.
Nice.
I think my favorite, Auntie Kim. My favorite thing about the work that we do, definitely like Kahikinaokalā mentioned, all of these things are left for us to go through and to take care of. I think sometimes we kind of tend to, at least as young people, and the kind of research that we have available. I mean, I think about Papa Kilo and the access that we have to Nuka, but literally at our tips of our fingers, we can just type in a term and just program OCR's newspapers, and we can look up X amount of hits and go through them. I mean, we're lucky we don't have to go through microfilm and go to the library, pull it out, put it in the machine, look through it, and then have to make copies of those things. I mean, you can just download them, have them as PDFs all the time. I think about the work and the aloha that went into preserving these things, into writing these things down. I mean, there are stories of kupuna who had arthritis, severe arthritis in their hands, but they refused to not let that get in the way of them writing into Nupepa or into recording things. And so when you think about all the sacrifices made that were made in order for us to have these things, it's Noi'INA, you know, how could you not go and spend time with these things? How could you not go and utilize these to the best of our abilities in order to push our language forward? So yeah, mahalo for that question. It's makes us feel really thankful and humble to do the work that we do.
Oh, beautiful. So Liana from, is it Pa'oilo, says, how about the toe names? Did you explore the toe names as much as you did the finger names? I saw one slide that said Iwi Mana Mana Vavai. Did you look into that at all?
Mahalo Anake Liana, and mahalo for always joining us. He's one of our top fans, top viewers.
Sure.
Number one, I think.
But Judd doesn't list the toe names like individually, like Lima Kuhi, Lima Lo'ihi. He just lists Pu'upu'uwawai and
Mana Mana Wawai.
Yeah, Mana Mana Wawai. So, but for the Pe'ahi Lima, he actually lists like 1, 2, 3 to go along with the fingers. And yeah,
I would think, well, my guess is that there's probably not a name for each individual one, because for your fingers, each one can be used for a different thing, but your toes mostly for walking. I don't think you can grab anything with your big toes unless you pocket it. Oh yeah.
It's a big mahalo from your fan club, Pelikikena. Here's another question for someone who is just learning how to navigate the plethora of Hawaiian resources available. Where are some of the good places to begin? Oh, this is the other webinar that you wanted to do.
That's a good question. It depends what you want to look for, but there's online, especially there's so much available, from advanced to beginner level. It depends if you want to learn Hawaiian language. There's lots of beginner classes out there. Kanayokana, Ehopili Mai, Niola Hiki, Olelo Online, there's so many just for beginner Hawaiian language. There's archival resources online. Hawaii State Archives, they just put out their beautiful digital collections. If you go to them, that's kind of more advanced stuff. But from beginner Olelo Hawaii stuff to all the way to archival materials, it's all there. And in person, I don't know. You have to look for COVID. Oh yeah, Duolingo is good on for Olelo, but you kind of have to watch out for COVID, as some places are reopening, some are still closed. So just to we have Google, so it's easy to do research these days.
Yeah, and then I think about the databases like Urukau, like Papakilo, and just I remember when I was in high school, kind of figuring out Urukau, I would just be on there for hours every night, just looking to see, because I would just get so caught up in everything. Oh, I want to learn about this, I want to read this, let me download that. So sites like that are good to just explore. And then when you want to get more specific, then going to places like the archives. Kala mentioned that the archives, Hawaii State Archives, are doing such an amazing job with digitizing a lot of their collections. I know, for example, they put out like a Lili'ua Kalani collection, and one of their foremost digital collections is the genealogical collection. So the archives have literally hundreds of genealogy books that they've been putting online. Ulukau has been up. We checked today, Ulukau and Vehevehe. Mahalo for that, Auntie Kim. I also wanted to talk about, what was that? Hulihua.net. Just a little plug for Hulihua. I know Wordle is kind of a popular game right now.
So mahalo to Keola Donaghy.
So Keola Donaghy,
he created a Hawaiian version of Wordle, Hulihua.
Yeah.
So one puzzle a day, 5 letters. But anyway.
And it's not, even if you're a beginner, Mako'olelo Hawaii, I think you could play. Yeah. So
Mahalo for that question.
That's awesome. What other books besides Anatomia, what other books might you consider taking a deeper dive into?
books wise, depending on what you want to learn about or read about, there definitely are staples like Ololo no Eo, Ruling Chiefs of Hawaii,
Hawaiian Dictionary.
Hawaiian Dictionary, of course, all the Hawaiian dictionaries, Kupu'i's Dictionary, Andrew's Dictionary. Kent has a treasury of Hawaiian words. Place Names of Hawaii by Kupu'i, Mo'okini. And then for values and systems, like belief systems, Nanai Kikumu by Kupu'i that QOC just put out a 3rd edition of, but Nanai Kikumu series.
Yeah, there's a bunch out there.
And then things are more, I think, what is it? Mo'olelo Hawaii, Mako'olelo Hawaii, Kepelino, Papa'i'i, Fragments of Hawaiian History. Yeah, it's the Kumako trilogy. Malo's Mo'olelo Hawaii. All staple works that I think is really important to read. Yeah, you should have them on your shelf and you should read every single one of them, because really it's foundational things that you should be reading about and kind of know before doing any other history work or going into anything, just because it'll help form your foundation and your understanding of things.
Absolutely. In Anatomia, I do have it on my shelf, but I've not gone through it carefully. Is there much information about muscles and organs?
There is. Yeah, we only talk about bones today, but he does have a comprehensive list of too as well, all the different muscles of the body. So let me just go into our table of contents.
Muscles, and then what's he calls kanahana, or the function of that muscle, which I think is really just so diverse, everything that he has. We're looking through the book.
Yeah, so he as well as the bones, we only chose to focus on the bones today, but he does have an entire index of all the muscles in the body as well. Like they do a catalog of the names and their functions in the body. So.
Interesting. And then does he have things like appendix or stomach, the internal organs?
Yes, all of those are named as well. Things like Akiniao is the spleen, Akimama, Pu'upu'u,
There's a bunch of
Papapole, Puhaka.
And the good thing about Anatomia is that in the beginning there's the English, and then in the second half there's also the Hawaiian text. So you can go back and forth and look at both too.
Yeah, this is in the printed copy. Folks that might want to look through Anatomia but doesn't have a chance to get a printed copy, Ulukau does have a PDF downloadable, but they don't have the translation in that version.
Yeah.
So that's a downside.
But
if you are able to go through it Mako'olelo Hawaii, then Ulukau has one.
That's great. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from our viewers out there? We welcome everybody's questions. Oh my goodness, Auntie Kathy's got a big question here. Mahalo nui, of course. Other than the EV focus, what was another interesting term or terms that you may have uncovered?
Well, it's like it's hard to choose, but let's just choose one.
The
Mine
Evie
was
boy
definitely
for the
Evie
scapula
Kopo'i.
was such a brilliant example, right? Maybe it's it's hard to top that. It was so brilliant.
Scapula and Evie Kopo'i.
Yeah,
Kopo'i is one of my
truly.
favorite ones.
Yeah, were you about to say another one?
Do you have one?
Oh yeah, she said she loved the EV lady. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we only showed about maybe 10 out of the 100 that there is. So we just kind of picked out the ones that were most interesting and well not most interesting, but that we can kind of analyze in a way that shows the process and the thought process, how the words were transliterated into Hawaiian, and the ones that we chose, it's easy to see, not too complicated. So like the EV boy, of course, and the EV late. And it's an EV late because it looks like a lake, right? So just to show that thought process, that we try to showcase some of them. Mahalo and thank you for that question.
That's great. Well, thank you so much to both of you for another episode. We don't have one planned for March. We don't have a webinar planned for March at this time because of spring break and whatnot. And then on April 22nd, there will be a special 3-hour webinar with the Kupuna councils. And Maka and Kala usually do some research into some of the old film clips of the Kupuna practitioners and run them through that. So if you have a chance, that's the next chunk of work that Maka and Kala are going to be doing for the community, for the public. And other than that, it's back to our archives, right?
Oh, we have a question from Facebook.
Okay.
Iliac, crest, or sacrum?
Oh, the iliac.
Just take a quick gloss. So a good thing about the printed version is that in the back there's a glossary. There's 4 different glossaries. So one of them is One of them is the Hawaiian to English glossary, and there's another one for muscles, the Hawaiian to Latin, and it's also English to Hawaiian, and for the muscles, a Latin to Hawaiian as well. So let me just take a quick look and to see.
Fabulous resource. I remember when Dr. Ben Young was at the head of the Native Hawaiian Center of Excellence at the medical school here. He was responsible for coordinating the reprint of Anatomia. So this was always this was a favorite of his, a favorite project of his.
So the sacrum is the ibi kikala. Kikala is hip. And then the iliac is?
We have Papakole Maloko, or the internal.
Internus is the internal, so maloko is inside.
Yeah.
Great. Hope that helps, Wainani.
There's no word specifically for the crest, but that's the internal iliac. So.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for another great episode. We look forward to bringing you back out for your next webinar. We'll let everybody know early and as soon as possible. And mahalo nui to all of the audience for your attendance this evening. This has been recorded on Facebook and in a recording, so it'll be available for future reference. Mahalo to Leikuluwaimaka, Meleiseā and Kahikinaokalā Domingo, because you're the best presenters, archivists that we have at Papaololokahi, and we love your presentations and your programming. To the back of the house gang, we have Keawe and Momi and Kamuela. Mahalo nui, I hope I remembered and Lisa. Mahalo nui to everybody. This has been a presentation of Papaololokahi, the Maoli Ola Malamalama Hale, and specifically Ola Na OEV series with Maoli Ola Malama Lama. Mahalo nui for joining us this evening. Hela mai kai. We'll see you at the next program. Aloha nui kako. Ola na Evie. Mahalo, Liana.